The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we're going to look back at our expectations for Austin FC's first season and maybe discuss whether or not those expectations were met. We'll also have Phil West on, the incorrigible uncle of Moon Tower Soccer, and we're going to talk about the playoffs and then some of the predictions we made earlier in the season. My name's Landon Cottom. I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jeremiah Bentley. And I think just before we get into that, we do have a little bit of Austin FC news to cover. So, we're going to wax poetic a lot on this show, and we're going to laugh about how wrong we were. So I feel like let's go ahead and start with some of the hard-hitting Austin FC news that people have come to know and expect from Moon Tower Soccer.
Yeah, so I think the biggest piece of news this week is Matt Besler retires. So we maybe speculated about that a little bit on the last show and ended up being true. So he's going to hang up his boots. After 13 seasons in MLS, he had, I think, 368 total appearances in MLS. 348 of those were for Sporting Kansas City, of course, and then 20 for Austin. Played in the 2014 World Cup with the United States national team. He's been in the league so long that whenever he joined Kansas City, they were called the Wizards, and kind of went through their renaissance and their rebrand and kind of restructuring of that team. And Kansas City became kind of the model for that second generation of MLS. And so he's seen a lot of this league, has had an amazing career. We're very lucky to have had him, even if it was for just one season. But what do we think we're going to see next from Matt Besler? I know we've seen some Austin fans hoping or maybe asking if he would maybe stick around and have a coaching role for Austin, but I don't know that that's very likely. Do you?
No, I don't think that it is at all. I mean, I think, like you said, he was such an integral part of the Kansas City franchise. Made his home there for so long. I have to think that he goes back up there and coaches, supports the academy. He's an ambassador for the club. I'm not sure what it is, but I think his future is back in Kansas City.
Yeah, absolutely. He's an absolute legend there. I think Benny Feilhaber is working in their academy right now, and so it seems like it would be a good fit. I'm not sure if coaching is what he wants to do, but Sporting Kansas City has been his life. And so I would be very surprised if he didn't end up involved in that organization in one way or another. One other little piece of news that we might dip into again later on in a future show, but Claudio Reyna did an interview with Jeff Ruder for The Athletic, just kind of looking back at Austin's season and looking forward at what they needed to change. There's one line that I wanted to pick out and highlight here. If there was any doubt about whether or not Josh Wolf was going to be the head coach for Austin FC next year, here's a direct quote from Claudio Reyna. Quote, "We believe in him. He's absolutely going to be back next year." So we kind of expected that anyway, but if there were any questions, Claudio has squashed those.
Yeah, that was pretty darn direct for sure. In that article. Yeah, another thing, just back on the Besler deal, Claudio in that same interview was asked by Ruder about Besler and, said that he was definitely not expecting it to be a one-year deal, and really that it's this sort of this injury, this career that led to this outcome. Because he asked him, did you have the sense it was 1 year originally? And he said, we didn't expect that, but we respect his decision, which puts puts the whole franchise in an interesting place on how does the club move forward in terms of replacing Besler, and where do we go from here?
Right. Yeah. So that's a big hole to fill for sure. But I guess bright side is Besler was on pretty high money. As far as salary goes, we could replace him with a very good center back for probably less money salary wise than he was making. Transfer fee is a different thing if we have to end up buying somebody, but it does open up a big chunk of our salary budget to use on another center back or in other spots on the roster.
Very true.
All right. The next bit we want to talk about is free agent list came out. So free agency is kind of a strange thing in MLS. Last season, they ended up opening it up a bit to where there actually are a lot more true free agents. Before, if your contract ran out, you couldn't necessarily just go and play for whatever team you wanted to. You had to go into, is it the re-entry draft? Is that the mechanism that you would have to go through?
I think it's what you have to go through first, right? Yeah.
But if you're a true free agent, you do not have to. And so we didn't have any out and out free agents. All of our guys on Austin's team anyway, all had an option. So which means that if the club wanted to bring them back, they could. All they have to do is say the word and they're back for a year. But we had 4 guys in that situation, being Alex Ring, Kekuta Mane, Aaron Schoenfeld, and Ben Sweat. So all of them, if Austin wants them back, they say the word and they're back on the team. But if they don't, they can let them walk and they can essentially go play for whatever team they want. Out of these 4 guys, who are the ones that you expect to see back and who are the ones that you really want to see back?
I think the first one's easy. I mean, Ring, I think, is kind of a no-brainer. He was open about that, right? He talked about wanting to be back in his last interview. I think even before we necessarily knew that he was a restricted free agent. So
yeah,
definitely Ring. And I would say definitely Ben Sweat. I feel like we saw enough out of him in his one game in 20 minutes. And I don't think he makes a ton of money.
Like 250 or something like that. So it's not a lot.
And we've got holes to fill all over the roster, and I feel like having a guy like Ben Sweat at 250 or whatever the option's going to be is like a pretty solid, smart choice. It allows us to focus elsewhere in the roster build.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I want Ben Sweat back on this team. He seems to be a good team guy. Probably wouldn't be super upset about splitting time or maybe playing second fiddle to Jan Kolmanic. But we've seen Kolmanic still has some growing to do as well. So having a veteran on the team like Ben Sweat, even though he's not a world beater, he's a solid MLS player. And I'd be, especially at the money he's at, I'd be more than happy to have him back next season. So I hope they do pick up that option on him.
So how about the other 2 guys? And I don't remember what we said last week. So on like whether we hope they were back or not. Well, I know what we said about Kekuta Mane, so I don't think we necessarily need to rehash that. But how about Aaron Schoenfeld?
Yeah, Aaron Schoenfeld. I had him on the list of that I would like for him to come back. I don't think I've even told you this, Jeremiah, but I received some information over the last week that somebody who had spoken to him directly that made it sound like he might not play anymore. So he might be kind of in a Besler situation. He may not come back. So whether or not we want him to come back or not, it may not be an option at this point.
All right. Do you want to add anything on Mane, or you think we said our piece on that last week?
No, I don't. I love Kekuta. Seems like a great guy. I don't want him on the team anymore. I'm sorry.
I think I would agree with that too. And another name that we saw sort of on the list that everybody was excited about was Aaron Long. But he's not really an option, is he? Yeah.
So whenever all these conversations started, this list hadn't been released yet. And a lot of people, I mean, the rumor was that he was going to be a free agent, but it's not entirely true. He's also on a 1-year option. So if New York Red Bulls want to pick up that option, they just do it and they have him for another year. And so that being the case, there was a lot of interest from Europe in Aaron Long over the last couple of years. If they want to get rid of him, I imagine they sell him at a discounted price to Europe as opposed to, I don't know that an MLS team would be able to give the kind of money that they would be happy with, because they were receiving bids for like $5 to $8 million for Aaron Long just a year ago or so. And so I don't think they're going to let him go for $1 million in TAM or whatever. Like, it's not going to happen. So I think it's very unlikely that if Aaron Long doesn't play for the New York Red Bulls, I don't know that he's going to play for another MLS team instead. I think if he leaves, it's going to be somewhere abroad.
All right. Do you want to get into, let's get into some predictions and questions.
All right. Here. Yeah. So we just kind of had like a little hodgepodge list here, which we'll jump into that list. But one really good guide that I was using to find these questions was an episode we released on March 30th of this year. And we had Joe Lowry, who's one of the co-hosts on Total Soccer Show. He's the main host on MLS Assist. and then writes for MLSsoccer.com, writes some for The Athletic. Really smart dude. We had him on the show, and it was during the preseason, so we had seen a little bit of the team and kind of knew like the team was starting to shape up a little bit. But we just kind of went through and did a season preview with Joe, and there's a lot of really good questions kind of placing where our minds were. And so I think it would be fun to kind of go back and look back at some of those questions. So the first one that I have here is, should we be concerned about our starting keeper, Andrew Tarbell? And so that one kind of shook out to be a little different than we thought it would, because not long after that, we found out Brad Stuver was our goalkeeper, and that actually he's pretty damn good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm open to admitting I was wrong about that. Like, I really did not believe that was an open competition. And I really thought that that Tarbell was the guy, and that Josh was just saying that to keep Tarbell motivated. So I'm very happy to have been wrong in that moment about what I thought, and super happy to see what Brad Stuver did during the season.
So I said it during that interview with Joe that I did think it would be a true competition, but it was not because I thought Brad Stuver was so good. It was because I had questions about Andrew Tarbell. So yeah, maybe a little column A, a little column B, but that was one that we definitely got big time wrong. Something else we talked about with Joe was whether or not we would see Nick Lima in kind of that tucked in fullback role that we saw him play with the national team, that like Pep Guardiola has used with his fullbacks, where they, instead of overlapping on the outside, they move into the inside and kind of become a midfielder. And like Joe Lowry was really high on that idea, and I was curious if we saw it. We haven't seen that at all, really. Like, we've seen midfield, like our fullbacks kind of tuck in further up the pitch as they've just kind of swapped places with wingers, but it's never been a thing where they're like tucking in and playing midfield essentially. So that was a thing that Wolf didn't implement from the former Berhalter system there.
Speaking of Matt, I was going to say Matt Besler. Speaking of Matt Besler, we talked about him too. The question was, does he have enough left in the tank to be a full-time starter?
Yeah, and this is I'm not sure what the answer is, because he played and started in 20 games for Austin FC. Essentially started every game that he was there for. Missed one because he had a baby, right? And then the next game he missed was because he was out for that concussion, I believe. So, I mean, the answer is kind of like he kind of had enough left in the tank, because he played more games than almost anybody on the team. But then this injury that has kind of left him out for the rest of the season and caused him to retire. So did he have enough left in the tank? Do you think without that concussion that he would have been able to finish the season strong and then maybe play another season?
I was pleasantly surprised by what we got out of him. You know, I think we had some serious reservations about the center backs, and once he was out, they were clearly well-founded, but I cannot criticize at all the way he played for us and what he brought to the team, and he never looked gassed in a way that some of the other guys did. So, I mean, I think he could have done it through this season at least.
Yeah, it never seemed a matter of like fitness. He was slow, but he wasn't just like dead tired ever, it didn't seem like.
He never got slower. He was just at Besler's speed all the time.
Another big question that kind of made me laugh was, in the preseason, Wolf had been playing Cecilio at one of those like dual 10, dual 8 positions. And so the big question for us all preseason was, is Cecilio going to play on the wing, or is he going to play at the 10? And the answer ended up being neither. He's going to play striker, because you don't have any others.
Yeah, did he end up starting more games at striker than anybody else? Probably, right?
Absolutely, yeah, he had to. He had to, because Hosen played in 5 games, and Gallagher was swapping in and out for him then. And then for not long after that, it was Cecilio at the 9 pretty much every game.
Yeah, because it was a long time. I forget how long the gap was between when we signed Gite and when Gite finally appeared, because he didn't end up playing in that many games. So yeah, that was an unexpected turn of events for sure.
So looking back at all of this, it really made me think of how much we were missing all season, and like how bad of a hand this team got dealt with injuries. So talking about Cecilio playing in neither of the positions we were expecting him to all season, And then also looking at the depth of the team. So a thing that I remember saying a lot in preseason and during this roster build is that Austin FC had set a high floor, that the floor was high, that they weren't going to be the worst team in the league because of the way they built this roster, and that the ceiling would be determined by their DP signings and how good those guys did. But with all these MLS veterans that they signed, that they weren't going to be terrible. And I was kind of like laughing at myself not too long ago, but looking back, we didn't get to see any of those guys. Like, we might have had a high floor with guys like Ulisses Segura, with guys like Ben Sweat, with Aaron Schoenfeld, with just these guys who have been proven guys to be able to step into an MLS team and maybe not be amazing, but not be terrible either, and just play some minutes for you. And we missed out on all of these guys all season. And so I think it's like maybe was still a decent prediction that just got like that floor got taken out from under us with all these injuries. And I think we kind of got used to it over the course of the season and stopped talking about it. But it really was a big deal to be missing those guys for the whole year.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't just us, which is like what makes me, feel that it wasn't just like us being Verde glasses, homers or whatever, but a lot of people thought that, I mean, I remember Tom Bogert talking about us having a high floor?
Yeah.
High floor. Joe said that on that show, I mean, we saw a lot of that all around the league, that almost nobody expected us to finish as low as we did in the West early on. And so I have to think that part of that is just the hand we were dealt, like you said.
So let's jump into some of the player acquisition periods when we were doing drafts. There were lots of player rumors. The first one, let's start off with the super draft. So everyone expected Austin FC with the number 1 pick to choose Philip Mayaka. And our expectation was that we should expect one and only one productive player out of the expansion draft. And we didn't pick Philip Mayaka, but I think the rest of it was right, that we got one and only one productive player out of the super draft.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, Pereira he was up and down, right? Because he's 20 and he played like a 20-year-old player who hadn't, been professional skills. But it looks like he's got a fairly bright future too. And so I think that was definitely a hit out of the super draft.
Yeah. And so looking back at Philip Mayaka, he's been playing the whole season with what's Colorado's USL team called?
The Switchbacks.
Colorado Springs Switchbacks.
Great name, by the way. But yes.
And I think a lot of people had pointed to that and been like, oh, we definitely made the right decision. By all accounts, Philip Mayaka is still like a pretty hot prospect, and they do expect him to be a good player. But I think for what we were looking for, like, I think Danny Pereira was a solid pick, and I'm pretty happy with it. If nothing else, I just like Danny.
Oh, he seems like a great guy. And he's, what do we see him? Just on Instagram this week, I've seen him at the Longhorns game and at the Austin Spurs game a couple nights ago. So he's making his best like Austin life and fitting into the community. And that is the difference between your first pick in the super draft playing for the first place team in the West or the 12th place team in the West, I think, is like how much game time you expect out of them in their first season.
Yeah, so I think we could call the super draft somewhat of a success. Expansion draft, I think we might feel a little bit differently about that. So kind of our prediction there, like expectations, is that we could get one starter, like one solid starter out of the expansion draft is a success. But if you can get a few role players, maybe 2 role players, I think that's a solid draft as well. What we ended up getting was essentially 2 players out of it. So the picks were Danny Houston, Jared Stroud, Brady Scott, who ended up going on loan all season and may go on loan again. Joe Corona, who ended up not signing for us and signing for Houston instead. And then Kamal Miller, who we traded for allocation money and a draft pick that turned into Freddie Kleeman, who didn't play all season. And Kamal Miller ended up having a pretty good year this year, and a guy that probably we could have used had we kept him. So I think that pick, because we got some allocation money out of it, I don't think that's as like that specific part of it is as terrible. The Kamal Miller thing is as terrible as people make it out to be. But the draft overall it's not great to get two players, one of which ended up being injured all season and wasn't great in the games he played, and Danny Houston. The other one being Jared Stroud, who was also not amazing all season. I think this was probably a failure, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think it was the biggest mistake that we made in the roster build was this expansion draft. And I don't know exactly why, but I was really disappointed in it overall. And I think, even at the time, it depended a little bit on Joe Corona, like signing and being decent, just like on that one day, right? Because Brady Scott was a surprise. Danny Houston's making a ton of money. And it was a real gamble then. And then Jared Stroud, and I'd assume he'll probably be exposed to the expansion draft again this year, but may well not get taken. But probably, I doubt he'll get selected.
Yeah, and Joe Corona ended up not being much of a player for Houston this year, but it's not really the point, right? It's that you could have used that spot on someone else that you would have actually signed to your team.
Right, and there were some other players out there. We did that show and article both with the Chris's, with Wellhouse and Haig, about who we would have taken. And there's some options still out there that I think probably would have been better than what we ended up with.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say all of those guys would have been options, because as we mentioned on the last show, there's so much we don't know about contracts and all that kind of stuff. But surely at least one of those guys who was playing or starting for another team was available that you could have brought in. So I don't know. Another thing that we were speculating a lot about during the roster build was whether or not we would sign a big name Mexican player. And I kind of forgot about this, but there are quite a few rumors, right? So
yeah, there were. I remember we did an interview. That was another interview we did with the writer
Tom Marshall.
Yes, Tom Marshall, and talked about the potential Mexican players for the U.S. I think a couple of these, for the U.S., for Austin FC, and a couple of these, there was some smoke around the rumors.
Yeah, it seemed like it. I think for the Hector Moreno one, Hector Moreno was doing interviews with Glenn Davis on the radio about Austin FC.
Yeah,
and so that one seemed like it was legit.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, he talked about Austin. I think there was some weird Twitter background or something on that too, right?
I don't remember what that one was. Miguel Ayun was in Austin. He made a trip to Austin last Christmas around then and was posting photos from a Target in Austin with his family. And so we're and then from the Trail of Lights and stuff, it's oh, he's clearly here scouting out, gonna buy a house or something. He's gonna come.
And he was interacting on social. Remember, he was talking to the Austin fans on social media too when he was up here,
trolling us. Paul Aguilar was the other one. That one didn't last as long as some of these others, I don't think. But then another one that we didn't get. I don't know how much we can talk about this, but there was a rumor, and a pretty strong and believable rumor, that Austin FC was trying to sign Henry Martin, and it fell through because he ended up re-signing with. He plays for America, right?
Right. Yeah, and that rumor. That rumor was we found out about it after the fact. I think. I don't think we ever proactively, if I remember right, we never talked about it as in the potential, and we talked about it more as this was a thing that we can credibly believe was an opportunity that we missed out on.
Yeah. So a few opportunities there. I don't I think we talked about this, but I didn't think it was inevitable that Austin FC was going to have a Mexican player, because I think Reyna's going to look at the roster build and take value and quality above all. And there's not a lot of value in Mexican players playing in the United States. They're almost always going to be a little bit overpriced because of the marketing boost that they're going to give an American team, especially a team in Texas. And so it seemed a little bit unlikely there, but there's still time, and we could still add a free agent or something in the off season or in the next few years. I think it would be great if we did get a Mexican player at some point, but I wasn't super surprised that it didn't end up happening, even though there were all these rumors.
And there's an Austin specific premium there too, because if I remember right, Anthony Precourt, at the very first interview he did with anybody, talked about wanting Chicharito. Right. I don't even remember who that was with. And I think the rumor we heard was that because the Mexican teams knew there was so much interest from Austin, even beyond just normally them understanding what the marketing value was, like they were really trying to squeeze Austin FC for money. So I'm glad we didn't overpay, right? And you're just going to look for the right player and the right chance and kind of go from there.
So another thing I wanted to talk about was the jerseys. So I know we were all super excited to see them just because we were excited for everything. Like everything was a first. Having looked back at like having seen these jerseys for a whole season, how do you feel about them? And we can talk about them separately. How do you feel about the away jersey, the all white one?
Well, good. I want to talk about them separately because I was not very excited about the all white one. I still don't like the all white one, and I love the rumor that it's going to be replaced next year with something else. I just hope that something else is not the standard Adidas jersey that everybody else wears.
Yeah, I agree. So whenever it came out, the white kit, I thought it would look really nice on the field, and I think it looks okay on the field. But after watching it over several games over the year, I'm kind of over it. Like I don't really like looking at it anymore. But the home one has actually like grown on me a little more. I really dig it. I think it's really cool, even though it is just like a basic Adidas template. The green and black just looks badass, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I like that one a lot, and I would like to see us stick with that one for a while. And it even fits to somewhere in like the Yeti cap that I think at some other game was it one of the last home games? Like the first 10,000 people came in and got a Yeti cap, and the Yeti cap has the same design as the home jersey. It's like alternating black and verde stripes. And then
yeah,
I was gonna also. What did you think about the all the training kits and thirds? Was there one of those you liked?
I liked. There's like a black, like warm up top, like a pullover type thing that I thought was sharp. But some of the other ones I didn't really care about. But it's the ones that every team has, like those gray warm up tops that every team had. I didn't really like those. And I think there's some of the, like, are you talking about more like the one-off ones, like the Pride one?
Yeah, there was one of those that you really liked. Yeah.
I didn't. So I think I would have liked some of those if they were like team specific, but because every team in the league had them, I didn't care about any of them.
Yeah, I don't really. The Pride one's probably the one that I like the best, but I still would have liked to see the Austin version of the Pride one and not the MLS template version of it.
We're never going to get that, though.
I know.
Like you said before, the best we can hope for, and it seems like this is going to be the case, is they'll kind of be on a 2-year run. So the home kits, the black and verde kits, will keep for next year and replace the away kit. And then the next year we'll have the same away kit and replace the home kit. That's from what I've heard and from what I understand, that's kind of the schedule it's going to be. So we should have a new away kit probably soon, right? Like you would expect them to release it before the holiday season.
I would think so. I mean, if you're in the business of making money, and I'm pretty sure they are, you would want to make that a gift.
Yeah. What about the stadium? So I think we were both fine with the stadium name being Q2 just because it was kind of generic. There's a lot of people who didn't feel that way and were disappointed it wasn't Buc-ee's Stadium or, I don't know, Franklin Stadium. I don't know what people wanted it, but it was. I think there was a lot of people with unrealistic expectations. Do we think people like it better now? How do you feel that the name is caught on and kind of settled into public sentiment?
I feel like some of those people who said that they would never call it Q2 Stadium, and it'd always be, McCalla Place, McCalla Place or whatever. Like I feel like those people have given it. I mean, it's quick and easy to type. Like it's even if some of the ones you like it's a lot simpler to type Q2 than Whataburger Stadium, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so just practically, it's a good option. So yeah, I feel like that furor has died down and not something that we need to worry about anymore. Do you have a different opinion?
No, it seems that people have accepted it okay, and I think it can always be like McCalla can always be a nickname for it, and it's in the songs. Like every game, the people in there singing about McCalla, and so I think that'll always be an affectionate nickname. But I think Q2 is fine. As long as we're not just something
like lower.com, for example.
Lower.com
Lower.com is horribly awful.
Papa John's or like just an absolutely stupid name, then I'm fine. Q2 is just nothing to me, which is great. That's the best you can hope for.
Yeah, and speaking of with the other teams in Texas, they have like
Toyota.
I mean, it's the most generic possible, like banks and car manufacturers everybody has. I mean, at least Q2 is not ever going to be confused for an NBA arena or Major League Baseball stadium or whatever. Like, we're the only one of those.
Absolutely. So what about, like, I know that your boyhood club, LAFC, you had another team. And I had some teams. I had like soft spots for other MLS teams because I'd been really like dove into the league a few seasons ago and was trying to learn as much as I could about it. And I had my favorites. Like I had teams that I really like to watch. Has that changed for you? Like, how do you feel about LAFC specifically now?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it has changed. I mean, I guess, watching a random given game on a given night, like I want LAFC to win, but the passion I feel for that club is nothing like for Austin. And I would say that about, not just, I mean, we've mentioned on this show and other shows, like what a Liverpool fan I am. And I still am a huge Liverpool fan. And, like, I'm happy to still have a team to follow during the off season, but it's like orders of magnitude different. It's like my interest in like how it affects my like everyday life, in terms of like how Liverpool does and like how I feel about Austin FC.
Yeah, so I've heard people talk about like having kids and how you had all this other stuff in your life that you thought was really important and that you cared a lot about, and then you have kids and all that changes and like your focus kind of shifts. I don't have kids, but I imagine it's a little bit like that. There's like all these other things that I was really into and I really liked, but now pretty much only think about and care about Austin FC as far as soccer goes. And like you said, if I'm watching a game, I'll I want Kansas City to win this game, or I want such and such to win this game, but I don't care about it very much. And yeah, just the difference in the interest is so great that I didn't really expect to care so little about some of these teams at this point.
I think that's and I'm glad it's the same like with my, like, I do have kids, and like it's the same with my son, and it's been the best things about this season is how much Jackson's into Austin FC more than anything else, which has made this even better. And it's not, obviously the results weren't great. It's more like the people and the culture and all the friends we've made and the people listen to the show, like all those like side aspects to it. And it keeps you back to like, imagine how good this would be if we were actually good. Yeah. I can't wait till that future comes, because like it's kind of awesome now. And we're kind of terrible.
Yeah. So talking about that community and the supporter culture, the home opener and just the supporter section in general, how did that match up to what your expectations were before the season started?
So the home opener was so good for so many reasons. One, it was the first time that I had seen people in public for a long time, right? We got out and we walked around the stadium and ran into folks we hadn't seen in forever, and people who were part of the movement since it started, and friends from the community, everything like that. And it just blew me away. And this story that I tell people, that I think I've told on this show, is so I have 3 seasons tickets, and for the home opener, I talked to my 2 boys and I'm like, "Do you want to go?" And my older son was like, "Yes, absolutely. Let's go do this, Daddy." I told him it was going to be a long day. And then my younger son was like, "Well, I don't know." And I was like, maybe it's a no at this point in time. Like, there is no, like, we're either all in and we're going to go crazy, or we're just don't even try. And I'm really happy I made that choice, because it was very, very exciting, and probably more than I ever imagined.
Yeah. And one thing that I kind of forgot about looking back at all of this is we didn't know if we would get to go to the first home game, right? Because so many MLS games at the beginning of the season were playing with no fans or very limited fans. And so we were like praying for construction workers to slow down, right?
Right.
And like finish it slower so we can actually go to the game. And I think they ended up kind of working it out, maybe intentionally, maybe not, to where they could have a full capacity for that first home game. And it ended up being a really special environment. And then, so let's focus on the supporter section. It's been one of like probably the best part about this season is the supporter culture that's that we've gotten to show off that I think we all kind of knew was something special, but we didn't know what it was going to be. Is this bigger than what you thought it was going to be before the season started?
I mean, for me, I think it was. I mean, there were times not that long ago when I was wondering, like, are we just in a bubble? And you and I know 500 crazy people that are going to show up and, are going to be loud in that section, but Austin is not really a soccer city, and who knows if all the things are going to come to pass. So yeah, I mean, I was concerned going into the season about whether all these things that we had talked about were really going to be, a thing or not. I mean, how did you feel about it? What was your moment when you're like, oh yeah, this is absolutely everything I thought it might be?
I think I had several moments over the last 2 years probably where that bar got raised a little bit, where I was like, okay, I think Austin could support a soccer team. And then there was a certain moment where I was like, oh, I know they can support a soccer team. I think this could be like a pretty good supporter culture. And then that would get surpassed, and it would get surpassed. And as we got to right before the beginning of the season, I was like, MLS doesn't know what's about to hit it. Like, this is going to be huge. And then, so I had high expectations, and then that first game surpassed them. And it was like even higher. And I was like, whoa, this is special. And like, it happened probably a couple more times throughout the season. And I think that last home game against Sporting Kansas City, where we won big and it was cold and the stadium was packed, and that supporters end was going crazy and the whole stadium was super into everything. It was just like a good like bow tied on it, that like, we're a terrible soccer team, we're still able to drum up this kind of support. And I'm just like so proud to have been whatever part of it that I have been, just to be able to be there to witness it all from the beginning it's really special. And yeah, I think it's pretty amazing what we've all been able to do.
Well, I mean, not everybody has their own mouse pad that you can buy on Amazon with their own picture. But I think one of those moments for me that I just thought of now was when everybody showed up on the hill outside St. David's Performance Center for the preseason match. Were you one of the people that were there for that? I was out of town.
No, I don't remember why I couldn't go, but I wasn't there.
But yeah, when you have a couple hundred people that want to show up and play drums and wave flags and pop smoke on a dirt hill for a glorified exhibition, you probably do have something special going on.
Yeah. So talking about like quirky moments like that, is there any other like favorite quirky moments from the season?
So I have this one, and this goes back to, this was an interview we had, but the Verde Keeper Kit video from Brad and Carey, which is what, 30, I think it ended up making like 35 parts to the series or something before something they actually, like that. I mean, it was insane. And the commitment to it, it was also one of the first times that, Brad Stuver was like a part of it and playing along with it. I'm like, oh, these players are also bought in this community. And we saw that throughout. We saw it with Diego, and we saw that with Danny, and I mean, a lot of other players are bought in the community, but I felt like for me, like that solidified that connection between fans and players that, again, like I hadn't even thought about before we had a club on the field.
Yeah, I'd always kind of like dreamed about like what these interactions with players would look like and all the fun stuff that would come from that. And that's a beautiful example of this weird thing that could have only happened like with this group of fans and with that player. And it like, it turned into this really beautiful moment. I think one of mine is going to be, and this is a deep cut that a lot of people may not know about, but Los Pringles. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. It's all the emojis that occupy my Slack. But yeah,
it is essentially a cult that arose within Los Verdes due to a I don't remember what company, General Mills, no, somebody else. Some food manufacturer had a deal where if you bought like 4 cans of Pringles, you got a $50 gift card to the MLS store. And so a big group of Los Verdes figured out how to kind of game the system, and we're just getting a bunch of free jerseys essentially, and started a cult praising Julius Pringle.
Julius. Did you know his name was Julius before this? I did not.
Is it actually his name, or that's something that?
No, I think it really is. I think his name actually is Julius. Yeah.
Julius Pringle. So he's now San Julius, and he is the the figure that the people who are members of this Pringles cult worship. But there's Pringles paraphernalia at the games if you look hard enough, and it's just this really bizarre thing that like just shows like the kind of cool weird stuff that this community has done, and also just like a thing that I feel like maybe wouldn't have happened only in Austin, but Austin is one of the handful of MLS cities where this could have happened and gotten such a big following, because I think there's like 250 members in that one channel in the Los Verdes Slack. And so that's one of my favorite weird things that's happened over the span of the season.
Yeah, somehow I got a business card that only has like a picture of Julius Pringle and it says under his eye that I carry around now. That I just picked up from somebody, and I wasn't even that much of a part of it, but I'm like, you know what? I love this. And it's that, and it's like, what is it? Pollo the chicken, and like Paul the alien, and like
Pollo.
all these quirky little things that make the Austin FC fan experience such an amazing experience.
Absolutely. All right. Well, should we go on to our interview with Phil, Jeremiah?
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a break and then talk to Phil.
Yeah, so Phil West from the Striker Texas, you all know and love him. We're going to preview the MLS playoffs and then take a look back at some of the maybe good and not so good predictions we've made over the last year. So we'll be right back. Hang tight. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education.
You can go to fvf.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's fvf.law. All right, we are back with a man that you all likely know. He's a writer for the Striker Texas. He's a contributor to MLSsoccer.com, and he is the incorrigible uncle of Moon Tower Soccer. It's Phil West. Phil, thanks for joining us.
Hey, gentlemen. Anytime. Glad to be here. I love the playoffs, and I love talking about the playoffs with you too. So I'm super excited. And I'm also really excited that you guys have kind of dialed in some R-rated Moon Tower of late. I like how you're dealing with the swear words. It's kind of a gentle beep, over a single vowel, so you can pretty much tell exactly what it is. So I enjoy that. So maybe I'll let something loose. I don't know.
I nudged that 1K tone just enough so that if you want to know what we said, you can. But if there are children in the car, that maybe they won't know what we said. And so we were listening back to some old episodes trying to like gauge what we wanted to talk about. And on the episode about a year ago before the MLS playoffs, that's when we gave you the title of Moon Tower Soccer's incorrigible uncle. And so that nickname is going on about a year now. But let's jump into some of our predictions. We're going to revisit some predictions from last year. And then from earlier this year before the season started. And then we're going to jump in and make some new predictions for this year's MLS playoffs. But before we jump in and start previewing the playoffs, let's get into those predictions from earlier this year. So in April 2021, we had Phil West on to preview the MLS season. He's a very knowledgeable man about MLS. And so therefore, we kind of assumed he would make some really smart predictions. And let's find out if that was true. So season predictions for the 2021 season. Where will Austin FC finish? I guess you guys are looking at this document. I was going to ask if you remembered what you picked, but Phil West picked Austin in 6th place. Jeremiah made a controversial pick and picked them in 7th place. And I picked us outside of the playoff spot in 8th place. I know that we revisited that a while later, Jeremiah, and kind of got to change our guesses after a few games. Do you remember what you changed your prediction to?
Yeah, I moved him from 7th to 9th, which apparently was also overly optimistic with the way it turned out.
Yeah, I went from 8th to 10th. So still not right.
Yeah, and I think in my head, I remember listening to that. And I said, yeah, I'd probably go 9th now. And again, yeah, just wildly bullish and optimistic on Austin FC all season. That is maybe the way, as fans as well as people who cover the team. But yeah, I mean, certainly at times they had the look of a fringe playoff team, and at many other times they did not, which you have covered at great length this year, as have we.
So do you think, like, in the way that we missed it, I feel like that the ways that we picked were fairly consistent with like what a lot of other like non-national writers and stuff did too. So do you have like a single thing you would attribute us being that off to? Homerism, the roster not being as good as we thought? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe Hosen not kind of working out the way that he was at striker, and everything just kind of collapsing as a result of that. I mean, again, also the injuries. I mean, that's been something that, you know, Wolves kind of talked about throughout the season, and, you know, call it what you will. Is it an excuse, or is it, you know, an actual logical explanation? But they lost a lot of depth throughout the season, and I think that really kind of hampered what they were trying to do.
All right, let's move on to the next prediction, which was who's going to MLS Cup. So, Phil, you picked Minnesota versus New England at the beginning of the season, which is still maybe not a terrible pick. Minnesota is a little bit, maybe not quite the powerhouse we kind of expected them to be, but still doing quite well, especially with their form right now. And then New England is quite clearly the best team in the league. There's maybe some arguments for one or two other teams there, but ran away with the Supporters Shield race and have just looked really, really good all season. Jeremiah, you picked LAFC versus Orlando. Oh, sorry, and Phil picked Minnesota to win, mind you there.
Right. Yeah, I may change this a little bit. I have some thoughts on this in a second, but let's talk about LAFC first, I guess.
Yeah, we'll get into making our actual predictions. So you get a redo if you want to save any of your points for that. But if you want to look back on this, then that's fair enough too. Jeremiah, you picked LAFC versus Orlando and picked LAFC to win. LAFC finished 9th in the West and did not make the playoffs. So you're already out of this one.
That was a terrible selection. Again, one I don't feel like I was alone in, but yeah, I don't have any good excuse for what happened to LAFC. And you know, Orlando has somehow been like decent and disappointing all year too. I think we'll probably talk about that when we talk about first round matchups, but I don't feel very good about either of my picks making it very far.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we all had Columbus and LAFC as 1 seeds. And I've never been more delighted to be wrong than I was about Columbus being the number 1 seed in the East.
So
I mean, that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I got away in this episode without actually making a pick. I didn't actually make a pick during that show. I kind of think, looking back, I picked Columbus and Seattle. I don't remember exactly who my Western team was, but I kind of think I picked Columbus and Seattle, which Columbus didn't make the playoffs. Seattle has actually been quite good for most of the year, but not for the reasons that we expected them to be, maybe. And then, okay, let's jump into who will Austin's leading scorer be. Phil, you picked Danny Houston. And then also in that same episode suggested that maybe it would be Sergio Aguero.
That was wildly optimistic. Yeah, those were 2 pretty crazy picks.
Jeremiah
turned out the way I thought it would.
Jeremiah, you somehow didn't make a pick on this one. We're not doing so great at these predictions, so we'll have to hold ourselves a bit more accountable here in a second when we start making predictions. But my pick was, my prediction was that our leading scorer wasn't on the team yet. And so I was wrong. Our leading scorer ended up being, was it Cecilio tied with someone?
Diego. Cecilio and Diego both.
So to defend my pick, Driussi ended up with 5 goals in 17 games. And so had he come in a little bit earlier in the summer like we expected, he very well could have been our leading scorer. So I'm going to count that as a 0.5 point for me.
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly who you thought, right? When you had suggested that.
Sebastian Driussi specifically.
Yeah, there's this guy over at Zenit that nobody's heard of yet, but he's going to come on the team and he's going to be fantastic. So going back to a second with the New England Minnesota thing, I mean, New England, I knew they were going to have a good season, but I didn't know it was going to be an MLS points record Supporter Shield level season.
Right.
I mean, they just everything clicked. I mean, Arena is a masterful MLS coach, and just, you know, for Buchanan and Hill and Buxa and Bo and Turner to all the seasons they did, that was pretty incredible. Yeah, Minnesota. Going back to that, remember my prediction was that them getting to MLS Cup was based on the likelihood of Reynoso having an MVP caliber season, and he did play with the garlicky smoothness of Supreme Serrano, but the attackers around him didn't necessarily have the zesty kick of Golden Habanero. So that's kind of what's hampered them. And then also, as a kind of related thing, Adrian Heath is still a coach in MLS. So that might be a problem that they run into throughout these playoffs.
All right, let's move into last year's playoffs, just to give it a bit of context, because last year was pretty wild. Like, I looking back at this, I kind of forgot that the season just died in the middle of it. Like 3 or 4 games in, the season just stopped because of the pandemic. And then we have the craziness that was the MLS's back tournament. And then this bizarre season where all the teams didn't play all the same number of games and ended up being points per game to go into it. And so we all knew that it was just going to be crazy anyway.
And then it was 18 teams in the playoffs.
Yeah,
too.
That's
and 10
thing.
In the East.
Yeah, so let's look back at some of our predictions. So I guess it would have been last November-ish as we were heading into the playoffs and we had you on for the preview show. We made some predictions there. So one thing that we asked on the show was if the playoffs was just an exercise to get Toronto and Seattle in the final again, because was it 2 out of 3 years that's what it ended?
Yeah.
So not possible this year. Toronto was one of the worst teams in MLS. Seattle still very much a possibility. So looking back at your predictions from last year. So Phil, you picked Philly, who was actually a pretty good pick last year. They ended up losing to New England in the first round. So New England kind of turned it on at the end of the season, and that was considered kind of an upset at the moment, I think. And then your other pick was Dallas, who actually overachieved in the playoffs. Do you think you could say lost to Seattle in the second round? And you picked Philly to win. So I think I don't know. How do you feel about those picks at this point in time?
I mean, Philly were the Shield winners, and Curtin's a great coach. I mean, I felt really good about that. I mean, Dallas was kind of a flyer. Dallas was kind of a, what weird things are going to happen on the west side of the bracket. And, nothing really weird happened there. I mean, the Sounders, well, actually, I mean, it was kind of weird because Minnesota had that 2-0 lead in like the 70th, 75th minute of the Western Conference Finals. And then Sounders came back with 3 goals in the last 20 minutes and won the whole thing. So, that was a little bit surprising. I mean, yeah, Seattle had a weird year. I mean, Seattle actually this year, if we recall, started the first 13 games unbeaten, and they've actually kind of slowed down a little bit in the latter part of the season, and ended up losing the 1 seed to the Rafts, which is pretty strange in and of itself. So yeah, I mean, still, I don't think those were bad picks, right? So just Philly and Dallas, and then did you picked Seattle and you picked Seattle and
I picked Seattle and Philly.
Okay.
So
yeah, and again, Seattle made it. Philly just hit a weird bump in the playoffs, as can happen sometimes in MLS. So. Yeah, those are respectable picks.
And then again, Jeremiah, we didn't make him pick for some reason. So
you can never be wrong. If you never make a prediction, you can never be wrong, which I think is what I was trying to live up to on that one.
So let's jump into this season. So Phil, can you tell us a little bit about just the general format of the playoffs? Because I think a lot of Austin fans, maybe last year was the first year they've watched the MLS playoffs, and it's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, last year was really confusing. They let extra teams in because it was a weird pandemic year, and that's how Inter Miami became a playoff team. So this year it is much more normal. So your 1 seeds have a bye in the first round. It's 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. Then the 4-5 winner plays the 1 seed. And then it's the 2-3 winner against the 6-7 winner. I don't think they reseed it. And then, yeah, you just go through the brackets that way.
And higher seed will always have home field advantage, correct?
Right. Yeah. So, and if New England wins throughout, I think I also had a prediction of a cold MLS final. And if New England does maintain their home field and get to MLS Cup, they will host it at Gillette Stadium, which will be super weird because that's a massive NFL stadium. Hopefully they will get fans to come and perhaps witness history, because the Revs have been to MLS Cup, I think, like 5 times, and they have not won it ever. They've been kind of the Buffalo Bills of MLS, if you understand that reference.
So decision day, I guess a couple of weeks ago, or about a week and a half ago, there was a lot on the line. I think there were still 11 teams that were competing for playoff spots, and only a few had actually cemented their spots. So it's 14 teams in the playoffs. Is that right?
Yeah. And there were essentially a few of those games that ended up kind of being de facto playoff games. Like in particular, Minnesota against the Galaxy was one where again, there were ways they could get in even if they lost, and they ended up drawing, and Minnesota ended up winning and or getting a playoff spot rather, and the Galaxy did not, because RSL had like a magical stoppage time goal to beat SKC and to sneak into the playoffs. And again, we saw RSL like not that long ago against Austin look not that great against Austin. So that can happen. You can have teams that are kind of fringe, kind of on the margins, like probably will not get very far in the playoffs, still get in, and they get Seattle in the first round. So good luck to them.
Yeah,
that might be challenging.
So what were some of the biggest surprises from decision day?
I would say RSL getting in was a huge surprise. Vancouver, I had expected kind of based on their form, but they still, again, it's still, they needed to get a result. Hosting Seattle to really help their chances, and they ended up doing that. They ended up drawing, and we'll talk about them a little bit later, kind of more in depth. But that was fun to see.
I would say another one would be Colorado ending up in first place at the end of the day.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I got to do like the recent voting for all the stuff, and then even though Arena was incredible and they had a supporter shield winning season, I still voted Fraser Coach of the Year, because again, what he did with that squad. I mean, there's no like real star per se on the Raps, but they got Barrios from Dallas. Jonathan Lewis has been really good. Cole Bassett continues to be a great player, but they just kind of can do a lot of different things, both offensively and defensively. And, again, Den Verde, we saw them kind of at a low point in the season, but they managed to pull it together and eat the number one seed out from both Seattle and SKC, who at times looked like during the season that they were going to be sure number ones coming out of the West.
Were you going to say something, Jeremiah?
Oh, yeah. I was going to add with Vancouver that I think the best thing about them is their coach. What's it, Sartini?
Yeah.
Vanni Sartini. Vanni Sartini. Did you see his post-game quotes after they...
oh, my God, yeah.
After they won, it was, what does he say? It's good we don't play for 2 weeks because tonight we're going to get so drunk we wouldn't be able to play. And I'm so full of champagne after this match, I'm going to stay away from the microphone. I don't want anything to catch fire. So I really... them making the playoffs and bringing him into my life is something I really appreciated about this 2021 season.
Yeah,
I think this week,
that, man.
I think this week he did an interview while he was making lasagna.
Yes, that's amazing.
All right, so let's jump into some of our predictions for this year. So, I think we can do this one first. So, who is your dark horse team? Like, who is a team that is maybe not favored to go far? And let's define dark horse here. So I'd say someone that you think will get to like the conference finals, so like the semifinals of the whole tournament, that is maybe not favored to do so.
Okay. Where they are slotted right now, it's going to be really, really challenging for them to do this, but I'm going to say Atlanta. And I may have a modest personal financial investment reflective of my belief that they are going to win MLS Cup. I don't know that they will quite do that, but and they haven't exactly shown it against other playoff teams, but Joseph is beginning to look like Joseph. He had a really nice goal to beat Cincinnati. Again, a lot of teams score goals against Cincinnati, but his was one of the nicer in the year. Araujo has been a really good addition. The new coach they picked up has been pretty outstanding. Came over from Sounders midway through the season, and they could go far, but again, they've got to go to NYCFC and play them, and then if they manage to beat them in a very, very weird stadium in which to play, they have to go to Foxborough and play the Revs. But they've got enough talent where they could really do some damage, and it'd be fun to see them host MLS Cup. But as a 5 seed, that's kind of challenging.
Yeah, I think kind of the big X factor with them is how if Joseph hasn't been Joseph all season. If Joseph is Joseph, then maybe this doesn't need to happen. But what they've relied on so far this season is they needed either Moreno or Barco to have a big game, and on nights when that didn't happen, they didn't look good at all. And so I think
they're capable though.
Yeah, if they can string it together and actually turn it on at the right time, I think Atlanta can go far. But I think it's a big question mark because they haven't consistently done that all year. Jeremiah, do you have a dark horse pick?
I am gonna take the and this is gonna be, I'll just go ahead and give away one of my MLS Cup finalists. But I'm gonna go with Portland all the way to the finals.
Okay.
So beat Minnesota, beat Colorado on the road, because I just like y'all say, I don't know that Colorado is like a traditional number 1 seed, and then we'll get another Cascadia Cup match in the semi. So I'll go with Portland to the final is my dark horse.
I can see that.
I wasn't sure if my pick counted as a dark horse, but since your dark horse is a 4 seed, mine is a 3 seed. Tell me if this is allowed, but I'm going to say Nashville as a dark horse. So are they seeded too high for that to count?
I would say yes, except the Revs had such a historic season that, we can let that slide. So make your case for Nashville. Because I think they could certainly, there's a case for them to win MLS Cup. But
okay, so I think this qualifies it. If I were picking them to get to the conference finals, I think they don't count. But I'm picking them to win it all.
Okay.
That's a dark horse,
I think that counts.
Right?
That counts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Let's move
that's
in.
Based on Mukhtar. That's based on the defense.
Just vibes. It's based on nothing. I'm banking on Hani Mukhtar to have 2 assists and 2 goals in every playoff game, and for Walker Zimmerman to destroy a man every playoff game.
Okay.
Well, I have a question. Let's say if they get all the way through, and can they play the MLS Cup at home? And if so, who plays the Gibson riff before the TIFF? Like, who's the biggest name that Nashville can get out there to play like a historic pregame guitar riff?
You could go big name. Oh my God. Okay, I was gonna
Taylor
say
Swift.
You could go big name, or you could go with Soccer Moses and do just like the hometown kid. But I think Taylor Swift is the right answer. That would be amazing to have Taylor Swift play the riff before the TIFF and for the MLS Cup final. Oh my God. Okay. So if Nashville plays your pick, Portland, Nashville would play at home.
Nice.
It's all happening.
All right. We have something to look forward to.
We're manifesting this into being. It's going to happen. Okay. So Phil West, who is your can't miss round 1 matchup? What's the best game of this first little round?
I guess we're gonna have variations on a theme here, because I'm saying Nashville hosting Orlando. Because truly, I have no idea how this will finish. I mean, there's obviously Seattle RSL. I have a pretty good idea. I'm not so sure of the other ones, but this one is like really wide open. And also on Halloween, actually Orlando was playing Nashville and had a stoppage time winner that was taken away on VAR. They said there was a foul in the buildup, and that probably cost Orlando at least one home playoff match, and they were pissed. So Orlando is pissed is like a really great starting point for any sort of MLS matchup. And then you throw Nashville in there, who this just happened against, and I just think that's going to be a good time for sure.
Jeremiah, do you have one you're looking forward to?
I'm going to go to Phil's squad and say that I'd like to see NYCFC in Atlanta. I think NYCFC is better than I think a lot of people thought they were going to be. Atlanta continues to have this, just like you said, if they get it together at the right time, they have a ton of talent. I think it'll be a really great matchup.
Yeah, that one could end up being a lot of fun, I think, given the right mix of ingredients. If the right ingredients show up, I guess, I think that game could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and seeing Castellanos, who's this year's Golden Boot winner, against Joseph, who, obviously has had some pretty historic seasons along the way and is coming back. I mean, I think just that matchup's going to be pretty fascinating. And NYFC has had a pretty stout defense all season, and that's going to be a lot of fun too. So.
I think the one that I'm looking at the most, and was mainly because it was the hardest one for me to pick in my bracket, to pick the winner, is Portland, Minnesota. These are two teams that have had quite a few ups and downs throughout the season, but both of them, when they show up and are on their A game, are really, really good soccer teams. And so I think depending on which versions of those two teams show up on the night, it could end up being a blowout, or if both teams bring their A game, it could be an amazing game to watch. So I think that's the one I'm most interested to see the outcome of. But I think all three of those should be pretty fun matchups.
And then SKC Vancouver is going to be really wild too. And the thing is, SKC finished losing their last 3 games. So, I think they're pretty vulnerable. I mean, obviously Children's Mercy Park is a really tough place to play, but Vancouver, and again, we'll talk about Vancouver in a little bit here as we get to one of the questions. But I think that'll be fun too. I mean, I think Seattle RSL might be the only dud out of those, and those games have a way of surprising you. I mean, RSL could certainly upset Seattle. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's kind of the magic of the the MLS playoffs is they can just be so wide open.
So you just kind of hinted at this, but I think there's two ways to look at there's like the head approach and the heart approach. So we're going to go with heart approaches right now. Who do you want to win the MLS Cup? Like, head apart, like what would be the best narrative for you, or what would bring you the most joy?
Well, I mean, I love Atlanta, and I would love to see Atlanta win it, and my wallet also says Atlanta, but my heart definitely says Vancouver. And so Jeremiah talked about Sartini. I mean, he is also been a magical force in my life this season. Just seeing Ryan Gauld and what he's been able to do. I mean, Vancouver's had very, very capable wingers, and Brian White's had a really excellent season. But just to see kind of everything come together with Gauld has been just fantastic, especially with people, just kind of dogging on Vancouver as, they're one of the worst teams in the league. All of a sudden you put a true number 10 into the mix, and they just look completely transformed. The other kind of X factor here is that inexplicably my 4-year-old daughter absolutely fell in love with the Whitecaps midway through the season. We were snuggled up one Friday night. I was putting her to bed, watching a few minutes of it. Was like a really terrible 0-0 draw against the Quakes. It's like kind of your consummate Friday night MLS match, and this is before Gauld came over, but she simply loved them and started calling them the Whitecap Cougars, which is basically just putting their name together with her school mascot. But she just became obsessed and would just, kind of ask me about them the whole season. And, occasionally we get glimpses of them. So we've been a Whitecaps Cougars household for quite a while now.
All right. Go Whitecap Cougars.
Be fun to see that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they would definitely be a fun underdog story. Jeremiah, do you have a heart pick?
Well, I think I made my heart pick when I made my pick in the West, and I mean, I like Portland a lot. I think I like the wily veteran team who's maybe getting it together for one last run. So that would be I'd love to see them, that group of guys, go out together with a MLS Cup.
I mean, that Aspria goal a couple of weeks ago was just phenomenal. Instant goal of the year candidate. Nothing else comes close. You just award it to him right there.
He's Mr. Playoffs, right? He could turn it on.
Yeah, Mr. October. Yeah. This is his time of year. No other time of year is his time of year, but this is his time of year.
We'll see if he can do it in November and December. Maybe it's that specific month, but I think there's a case to be made for the Colorado Rapids. They're the number 1 seed, but it doesn't feel like it, does it? I think people are still kind of looking at them as an underdog, even though they're the number 1 seed. I think that would be a nice story. You mentioned Robin Fraser earlier. I think it would be really cool to see this kind of underdog team, a little bit of an Island of Misfit Toys kind of build. They took distressed goods from other MLS teams and built this squad that has nobody is there anybody on that team that you could consider an MVP candidate? Nowhere close, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it would be really cool to see a team like that just kind of built on a shoestring with this coach that is maybe still underrated by some people to go all the way. So I think that's going to be my heart pick is Colorado. Let's move on to the head picks. Who do you think will actually win? And let's go with your finals matchup and who you think is going to win.
Yeah, if doing this with you guys for a couple of years has taught me anything, it's push the Sounders button until the Sounders button doesn't work anymore.
That's a really good idea.
So I'm going to say Sounders and Revs. I mean, those are kind of the money picks. I mean, the Revs look built for the playoffs. I mean, the one kind of drawback with them is that they played a lot of 1-goal games, but they've also won a lot of 1-goal games. So they kind of know how to do that. And, Matt Turner as a goalkeeper is a really good place to start. And then the Sounders, I mean, they have that 13-game unbeaten run to start the season. And João Paulo's had an incredible season. And, Rui Diaz is Rui Diaz. And, we all know too well. And, even when you plug in 5 teenagers, they can beat teams. So they just kind of find a way. And Schmetzer is another, remarkably still kind of an underrated coach in some circles, but he clearly shows that he knows how to do it season after season. Yeah, they're real good.
Jeremiah, who's your finals matchup?
I will agree with Phil on New England. And wait, are we doing these separately? I'll just say I think New England's going to beat Portland. I wasn't paying attention when you were asking the question.
What's your matchup and who you're picking to win?
Okay, New England over Portland with New England winning for all the reasons that Phil talked about when he was talking about New England. And so I'll probably, I feel like last season we all picked the Shield winner to win, and we're wrong, and so we'll probably be wrong again this season.
All right, so I'm looking at my bracket here, which I'm realizing now that I didn't do a head pick bracket. I did a heart pick bracket and I picked Sporting KC to upset Seattle in the second round and then to beat Colorado in the semis to go on to face Nashville in the final. I have Nashville beating New England in the semis and then winning MLS Cup at home. Wait, if it's
with Taylor
Sporting
Swift
KC in Nashville, who would be the home seed there? Because it might change my answer.
Well, they're both 3 seeds, right?
Yeah, I think it would go to games 1 and then to goal differential.
So games 1 would be the first tiebreaker?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're going to make me do math right now. Let's see. Well, because probably SKC, because Nashville is 12-4-18 on the season. They have 18 draws, which is a little bit of a problem if you use that as a tiebreaker. And then Kansas City's 17-10-7.
Oh,
so
man.
So it would be it'd be in CMP. So there would be no rip before the tip. So you would have to hope for Portland, I guess, but so Jeremiah would have to be right for that scenario to happen. Yeah, I don't think I picked a winner either. I guess I would pick New England over Seattle in that case. So they go head to head. A lot of it having to do with the head to head.
I think that's smart money. Like you said, they've won so many games by 1 goal this season, but in the playoffs, that's all you need, right? Win by 1, just get through. And it seems like a team that's been able to grind out results all season. And I think that's pretty smart money if you're a betting man. All right. That's all I have. Is there any other final points or predictions you wanted to make, Phil?
I mean, I just want to emphasize how much fun the playoffs are. I don't know that anything will top Orlando NYCFC last year, which was the absolute most ridiculous, 15, 20 minutes of my life. My son was actually driving. I was following on a cell phone. We were coming back from Albuquerque, where he was doing college last year. So we were kind of approaching Fort Sumter, New Mexico, and miraculously I got a cell phone signal. And this was the whole Rodrigo Schlegel had to be his substitute goalkeeper because Gaisi got a double yellow, I think it was, and then eventually miraculously stopped a shot somehow. But it was just 20 minutes of just complete glorious MLS fuckery, and it was just so much fun. So I don't know if we'll replicate this year, but it's just astounding. It's my favorite thing about MLS. I mean, I love so many things about MLS, but just that there is this kind of wild open playoff kind of system versus we're top of the table and we have been for 20 weeks and we get the Premier League trophy. This to me is much more fun and much more wide open, and just the discourse around it is incredible. I'm a big fan, obviously.
Yeah, well, I hope you're right. I hope it is half as much fun as that game was, and it's MLS. It's going to be fun, right? So thanks so much for joining us, Phil. We look forward to having you on. Hopefully, maybe in a couple of months, we'll do another MLS season preview for
that'd be fun.
Early 2022 season starting in February. But thanks again for coming on. It was a pleasure as always.
Absolutely.
Well, you don't need words to tell me things that drive me wild, right out of my brain. Well, you don't say it, and you can feel.
All right, we want to thank Phil one more time. Before we wrap up, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to continue the conversation, come find us on Twitter at lviajero87 and jbentley_ATX. And then if you want to read some more soccer news, you can go to the Striker Texas website. Jeremiah, what should folks look for over there?
Yeah, I have two pieces that both written by Phil West that I want to talk about. One ties into the interview quite a bit, and that was his November 8th MLS Notebook article, which is about it being decision day for the ages. And then also he did a good piece on the U.S. national team performance against Mexico called "If This Is Being Wrong About USMNT, I Don't Want to Be Right." So we'll link to both of those in the show notes, but they're both very good and very Phil-style pieces.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening. Next week is Thanksgiving, and I am going to be in Ireland all week. So we are still trying to see if we can put together something to release next week. It may not happen. Stay tuned to social media. We'll let you know either way. But we might be off next week. We might not be. In any case, we'll be back for sure the week after Thanksgiving on our normally scheduled Tuesday release. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Muchas gracias. Bye bye.